Thank you, and Angela, that angelic voice. Thank you. And Rick Fortner on the Hammond B3. All right. Thank you all. Matt, David. Wow, I needed that this morning. I needed that. I've been lost, and I've been found, and it feels good when we're found after we've been lost. There are some phrases that we all know, and if I say the first line, I want to see if you can come up with the last to finish it. All right, here we go. It's always darkest before. All right, that's pretty good. No pain, no. Okay, all right. Every dark cloud has a. All right. When given lemons make. All right, see? Each of these well-known sayings that we all know tells us that suffering and struggle can lead to something better. It is such a common idea, and it's so hopeful that many people, they like to get to the lemonade without having to taste the lemons. I remember seeing in an in-flight magazine one time when I was on an airplane, it was an advertisement promoting a process called liposculpting. Have you heard of that? Anybody? You done that? Anybody? You're going to admit it that you've done it? So apparently that they can extract fat from your belly and your buttocks and put it into your chest and biceps and calves. What a deal. Today, it seems like we can get thin without dieting, and we can gain muscle and shape without exercise. People want to gain without the pain. Or here's another famous phrase for you. We want to have our cake and... Right. Or we might say that we want to have our cake and turn it into muscle. But despite all the technological advances that we've had in society, no one has invented lipo-spirituality. There's no quick fixes to enlightenment, no shortcuts to redemption. Generally, redemption is about restoring something, getting back something that's been lost. For most Christians, it's about redeeming our goodness due to the belief that we were born with original sin. For Buddhists and Hindus, it's about being redeemed from a perpetual cycle of death and rebirth to our original state of oneness. Now, as I told the children this morning in our children's message, I like to think of redemption like a store coupon. A coupon has no intrinsic value until we use it. A coupon that ends up, as I said, like in a recycling bin, it doesn't get claimed for its full value. And in the same way, if our life can get redeemed for its full value when we use it for its intended purpose, if we can figure out what that purpose is, what are those gifts that we have? We can cash in our life, if you will, on this planet, in this time, this one precious life that we have, by figuring out, what do I have to offer to others and to this world? You know, Harry Belafonte, who died this week, he died at 96 years old, and he used his fame and his fortune and his notoriety to advocate for civil rights and for human rights. He was a unique figure in the history of the black freedom struggle here in the United States. He was a powerful voice for justice because he leveraged his celebrity, what he had, for the good of others. Did you know that in 1957, Belafonte sold more records than Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley? And he did that even though he refused to perform in the South from 1954 to 1961 because of the treatment that black artists received in the South. Having to go into the back of the club. You couldn't eat in the club. All those kinds of indignities. Couldn't use the same bathrooms. So whereas Sinatra and Elvis performed all over the country, Belafonte sold more records only singing to half of the country. Belafonte was a confidant for Martin Luther King Jr., one of the few people who Dr. King turned to when he needed advice. And he provided Dr. King's family with money. You know, Dr. King only made $8,000 a year from his church and his ministry. And so Harry Belafonte said, we need you traveling around the country. We need you to be the voice of this struggle. I will provide some money for your children, for clothes, to go to school, for books, for your family to pay the mortgage so that you can do what we need you to be doing. And then in 1963, he bailed Dr. King out of the Birmingham jail. And he raised $50,000 more to release other civil rights protesters from the Birmingham jail. And he contributed to the 1961 Freedom Rides when young people, black and white, crossed the country in buses, going into areas where black and white were not supposed to be together. Some of those buses being firebombed and attacked. He supported voter rights drives. He helped organize the 1963 March on Washington. And during the Mississippi Summer of 1964, Belafonte bankrolled the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, which was supported by John Lewis and other young leaders, helping them to find their voice in the struggle. In other words, Harry Belafonte used his talents and his gifts and those that were given and those that were acquired by him in the service of something larger than himself. By using it this way, I'd say he redeemed his life for its full value. What causes a person to be generous, to sacrifice for others, to rise above self-centeredness, to be there for someone else? In this tradition, Unitarian Universalism that this church comes from, we say that every person has value and worth to offer. And that it's the role of religion in our spiritual life to help us to discover and learn how that we can develop and how we can share our gifts. And we need this because sometimes life gets in the way of us doing the right thing. We fall short, even of our own expectations of ourselves. We become addicted, or we give in to temptation, or we procrastinate, or we suffer the effects of trauma, or we just make a mistake that hurts someone else who we love. There are a lot of reasons that we fall short. But when we do, we kind of need a recipe of some kind for how do we redeem ourselves or redeem the situation. That's what I want to talk about today, and I want to talk about a special sauce that brings this whole recipe together. I'm going to get to that in just a minute, but first, I want us to look at the story of Zacchaeus from the Christian Bible. If you know that story, we're told that Zach was short in stature. The word stature is translated from the Greek word helikia, which can also be translated as character. So he was short in character. He was a Jew, but he was also the chief tax collector for the Romans. And he was known for entering people's homes and taxing them on their property and sending the money to support the Roman Empire and the Roman army that was keeping them occupied. And he would inflate the numbers of the taxes, and he would take the extra money off the top for himself. That's how tax collectors were paid back then. The Roman Empire said, you get us what we want, and you can take anything else you want for you. According to the Bible, he was very rich. And to understand what being a tax collector was like back then, I want you to kind of imagine if Russia were to be successful in taking over and occupying Ukraine, and a Ukrainian person took a job collecting taxes from his neighbors to give to Vladimir Putin to support Russia and the Russian army that was occupying them. And the man was paid whatever amount of money he wanted to take above and beyond what Putin expected from him. And the person made himself rich off collecting taxes from his neighbors. That person would probably be despised by the entire town. Well, that was Zacchaeus. Now, word had spread in Zacchaeus' time and in his village that there was this itinerant Jew named Jesus who was coming to town. And it was said that he could teach and he could heal and he could tell a great story. And in other words, in the ancient Near East, he was a rock star. And so the crowds gathered like there was a festival about to happen, like there was a parade that was about to happen, and the people were lining the streets and lining their yards. But Zacchaeus wanted to see him, but since he was so short in stature, he couldn't see over to other people. So it says he climbed up a sycamore tree. And when Jesus and his entourage made their way into town, Jesus saw Zacchaeus up in that tree, and he said, Zacchaeus, come down, and I'm going to be a guest in your home for dinner tonight. And as you can imagine, the people were appalled. What? Of all the people in Jericho? Why would Jesus want to dine with that jerk? Now, some of the people probably assumed, well, Jesus is just like any one of those other money-grabbing preachers who cozies up to the major donors, and regardless of their principles and their ethical standards and how they live their lives, for the money. So Zach, who entered people's homes with greed and with power and intimidation to cheat people for his own benefit, experiences Jesus entering his home with love and acceptance. Through feeling this love and acceptance, Zacchaeus, shocked, he hadn't felt that in a long time, shocked him into transformation. Shocked him into finally recognizing the person he was born and meant to be. He was lost, but then he was found. When he was born, he was given the name Zacchaeus, which means pure and innocent from the Hebrew scriptures, Zakkai. Like you and me and like all of us, he was born pure and innocent. But through the course of growing up, he made decisions that debased his name and the sacredness of his life and its potential. We don't know all of his story. Often I think to myself, when I can't figure out how could somebody do what they've done, I realize I don't know all of their story. And you have your stories, and I have mine, the things we've done. The things that we've done that have caused a piece of our integrity to be left behind, broken. And the story of Zacchaeus gives us a recipe of how we can be found when we're lost. Let's see what the story teaches us. After experiencing this love and acceptance, which he hadn't experienced in such a long time because he was being an awful person, his deeds, Zacchaeus came out of his house, it says, and he addressed the large crowd who had gathered, probably to protest what the heck Jesus was doing in there. And he said, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I've been cheating you for years. You know it, and so do I. And I feel awful and ashamed. I've gotten rich at your expense, and I apologize. And to make things right, I'll repay each one of you from whom I've stolen. In fact, I'll repay you back 4 times the amount that I cheated you of. And today, he also said, I'm giving half of everything I have to the poor of this town. It's the original Hollywood ending. But the reason that it's in the Bible is it's a teaching story. It gives us the recipe for a good apology. It starts with saying the simple but demanding words, I'm sorry. I am genuinely sorry. But that alone is not enough. A good apology also expresses how we feel about what we've done. I'm really embarrassed that I did this, or I am really disappointed in myself. However you feel, expressing that, but making sure that it's sincere. And then, to complete a full apology requires us to offer or ask, what can I do to make it right? And then to do it. Many of us were never really taught how to make a proper apology. There are 3 steps. Saying I'm sorry is the first. Then expressing sincere remorse. I am embarrassed about what I did. And then finally offering to do what we can to make it right. Now, every relationship can't be fixed. Every situation can't be set right. But many can, and it begins with a good, solid, honest, sincere apology. Now, you may be able to tell that I know something about the subject of which I speak this morning. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've unfortunately hurt many people at different times in my life, never intentionally, never mean-spiritedly. But I've had to learn how to say I'm sorry. And what I've learned is that there are 2 kind of layers of forgiveness that need to be separated out. And one is external. It involves how the other person or how the world will receive your apology. Will you be welcomed back into relationship? Will you be redeemed in the eyes of the community? And this part's out of our control. We can only do at that point our best to say I'm sorry. And then the second layer is the part that is internal. It's our part inside. Can I live with myself? Can I forgive myself? To acknowledge our own humanity and our own imperfections and choose to be better going forward, because we can't change the past. We can only change the future. So what is that special sauce? For that, I'm turning to what Jesus does in the story. He loved and accepted Zacchaeus despite what he'd done, and that's what transformed and saved him. The crazy thing is that so often we withhold our love from people when we don't think they've done the right things. From our children, especially when they're teenagers and they act rebellious, we can be tempted to withhold our love. From our spouses and our partners, when some of their actions start to grate on us or they hurt us, we withhold. From people at work who annoy us or who are inept or unethical. From our adult children who sometimes make choices that break our hearts, scare us. And sometimes we even withhold love from ourselves. When we can't forgive ourselves for doing something that we feel is inept or doesn't meet our own expectations, then we can withhold love from ourselves and have a hard time just loving who we are. So even when Zacchaeus was at his most corrupt, most selfish, most sinful, worst, Jesus still loves him, sees in him that purity of spirit that is his true nature. And in feeling and experiencing that love, Zacchaeus was transformed. That's the special sauce. Love. And a Christian interpretation of this story would be that even when you are at your worst, God still loves you. or regardless of belief. It says, no matter what, you are lovable. You are redeemable. There is a pureness inside of you that you were born with, and you can return to it at any time. No matter what you've done in the past, no matter even what other people might do with or think about you, as long as you have breath, you are capable of redeeming your life. Externally, hopefully. Internally, absolutely. And you can even be a source of other people's redemption. Now, this is powerful. By not withholding your love, but using it to heal and inspire and save. By not pulling back when somebody does something wrong, but by trying to open up your heart and love. If you can. We're not all deities. We're not all that good. We have to forgive ourselves for that too sometimes. But when we have the capacity to love someone else despite what they've done and show up with that love, it is a special sauce that can change everything like no other. So let's practice saying the most powerful words that anyone can say. Repeat after me. I'm sorry. I love you. Amen. Thank you.
Come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around.